Sound again. Oh, catastrophe strikes. Part 2. Part 1 was a mere 4.5 hours. Back in my little chair. My postcards. Okay. Guy Fawkes night. But first, what a scutter. Alcohol is a scutter. Okay, Guy Fawkes night. Guy Fawkes night. There is Siobhan and the moon, and there is McX and Siobhan and the moon and the bridge. A humped bridge far out in the fields, away from his lordship's castle, away from the cottage, away from the road. Under the bridge there is an earnest eddy, always embracing the same round stone and the same triangular stone. Siobhan and the moon are friends. Well, the moon is friendly towards Siobhan, and for the moon, Siobhan has the love of fear. When she feels her most tender to the hills and birds and weather, she will step out with the moon and share a cigarette with it, both of them wreathed with haze. Anything of value in Scotland is haloed. The moon, loved ones who smoke, the blur of one's qualities, mountains, the sea of the Hebrides. On a night without rain or sleet, when McX and Siobhan gaze at each other in the after-supper mirror, where besides ideas of love, they see a call to the fields, they will go together to the bridge. At the night bridge, McX feels the whole of his love for Siobhan, the moonlight, the wellies she has given him, the shirt he has chosen to wear because of her hair, and the wind. At the bridge, his eyes unhood, his back straightens. He is barely McX, hardly Scottish. The bridge is the only place where Siobhan speaks whole of the moon, her land. The bridge is to her mind, as is the cottage mirror to their lovemaking. Siobhan sees and thinks, she says, most clearly at the bridge, under the moon. Siobhan studies McX, the dromedary curve, its relation to the lines on his face, studies his hand with cigarette, his clothes which have changed and become earnest since they two came together in the cottage. She sees how much she has given him and realizes out of how much love this has been. She had hoped merely to use McX as they use the mirror over their beloved mantle. She expected no invasion from a man that is such a Frankenstein of others' parts. Now she becomes afraid. All the fears she learned that were herself, the bottling of secret loves, forsaking, denying the love of men and women, all her journey from the singing other music life of Maury, all these ghosts have begun to slip away from her now, and she can't have it. Without them, she will be alone, nothing, by herself. In the mist, the beginning of rejection, of resignation. McX's eyes are shining with love, and since they have left the mirror but recently, desire for Siobhan and Siobhan alone. There may be several lights there, but each is the beacon of a different regard for her. McX loves at the same moment the whole of her, her skin, a memory he has of her walking up a street in Kerrymuir. And especially her nobility, her grace, her hands. And he is loving Blackwood. Siobhan knows nothing of Blackwood, yet she sees that important light signalling across the coast, signalling on the coast of McX. She begins to despair and even to hate. It is not right. She cannot breathe. She feels caged. How could she know she is loved through an imaginary child without being told? Yet, such is one of the ways to love. For McX, too, the moonlight is a truth giver. He sees Siobhan's doubts and fear. What could it possibly be that is wrong? He becomes troubled, suddenly taken aback by the complicated way he loves her. But there is always time for hollow gaiety. The mist is thickening along with McX's disquiet. Through it, he can make out the small, colourful lights of sparklers and fireworks at the castle. He pictures my lord staggering about, Roman candle in hand, giving orders, setting pets afire. In front of invisible cottages about the fields are sprightly wee flames and showers of light. The guy who tried to blow up the English Parliament is worth a match or two and a toast tonight. Oh, aye. Penny for the guy. Have a pound. And have a dram. My love is like a red, red fuse. Silent, Siobhan and McX walk slowly up the brae from the burn to their cottage. Where their eyes meet are the beginnings of storms. McX, full of fear and hollow gaiety, bundles Siobhan into a heavier coat. November is not a joke at night. From behind the press, he extracts his sack of little treats, a sparse kit of fireworks and a bottle of whiskey. Siobhan is touched, a memory of her grandfather dutifully setting off a single Catherine wheel in the middle of his Calvinist night. Siobhan and McX in dark fog with a bottle of whiskey and a box of explosives. They cannot see their house. McX pads back and forth in the vegetable patch, lighting the fireworks, all of which are the same wan highway flares. In the gaseous light of them, he pulls Siobhan close, thrilled by the feeling of her in her coat of artificial animal. He kisses her eyes, which dance from the fireworks, and tears of hollow gaiety. She has slipped away. She has left herself at the bridge where she prefers to remain with herself and her ghosts, where she wants only to remember loving McX. She cannot think of lying next to him now. She trembles. He hopes it is with cold. He kisses her, and it is bitter. Siobhan manages to smile. It is the smile of resignation she learned long ago at the graveyard yet, in dark corners waiting for her lover. A smile she taught herself when crying on her bed of girlhood. She smiles, and her eyes are wet. McX goes to bed without her this Guy Fawkes night, much as he wants her there. He is brave. His spirit has expanded so under the moon and whiskey mist with the male love of sulphur that he tells himself she wants to be with the moon for a time. Of all her lovers, this is the one of which he should be jealous. McX broils slowly on his blanket for a time and goes to sleep. Someone might add leeks and onions under the bedclothes and make him into a crispy bake. Blackwood is his dream when they are happy. Hefzibah when they are not. 5 miles from town is a place quite dear to McX. Having visited it once or twice, he often goes there in dream. It is a vale sheltered by old oaks and by the more modern windbreaks of farms. Streams wander through under miniature footbridges over casual little dams and through abandoned weirs. Decrepit cottages look out from behind flowering bushes. This place has the enclosed coziness of a stage set, a crazy golf park, the strange comfort offered to the insane by cute areas or systems, miniature villages, dioramas, cog railways. England. On a rise at the top of the field is a castle, fine and tall. Two slender towers joined late in life, after threats had passed from the minds of men who lived in castles. A famous leap by a famous lass between the towers saved her from being found in the arms of a churl, in someone's opinion anyway. McX pays the ticket manny who drowses over his machine. In the cool hall, on the remnants of a painted ceiling, flowers, dogs, men, and bears march in rich colours along black rafters. McX climbs up into a turret. His shoulders hunch and his chest caves in. Smoke? Better bloody hell not. Ancient monument. I must get back to my pipe. He peers out a slit, imagines peering fearfully out to see a line of enemy helmets and halberds appear suddenly at the bottom of the field. On the narrow stair of danger in the past, the slit offers little reassurance. It is 5 or 6 times the width of an arrow. To look out and see enemies coming, intent on getting in your castle and chasing you up and down stairs and then stabbing you right through to the cold stone floor. Imagine the sound, the feel to stobber and stobby. McX inhales quickly and squints his eyes as if smoking. Suddenly, my lord's daughter, Hephzibah, is with him on the turret stair. She faces him, her back to the slit. Hephzibah inclines, her aristocratic jaw in an invitation to kiss, the narrow strip of historic landscape behind her giving great contour to her artistically modelled features. McX's fingers open in imaginary drop of imaginary cigarette, which, with a little twist of toe, he imaginatively crushes out. He moves to her, pulls the heraldry of her garments and the flesh of her to him. His corduroy dromedary mingles sluggishly with her tailored country look. Leaning his jaw on her shoulder, McX looks out the slit, loving to dream in dream, and good God, sees his lordship fuming up the field like a locomotive, knocking down the ticket manny. Another rasp of breath. McX grasps Hephzibah's shoulders and points out the slit. Even without armour, my lord is a formidable enemy. Hephzibah slips down the stair. McX ascends to the roof, a classic tactical mistake. His lordship may be heard below in the great hall. Where the hell is that fucking bastard? Get out of my way, little Harry. Hephzibah protests in high semi-quaver, but cannot bar the way. Storm of titled, sozzled footsteps on the stair. Why, McX, his foot on the crenellation. At the base of the tower, angry thistles wait to cradle him. Baloo, bala, footsteps. For a moment, McX is caught, roofing from head to toe. Then, shapeless and strained as an early flying machine, he leaps, historical, across to the other tower and dives into its turret, hurrying down the stair. I must get back to my pipe. Hurtles across the field, across the road, along a winding path, having himself now knocked down the poor wee ticket manny, breaking his machine, spilling his air namor in the long grass. From the castle, imprecation upon imprecation, followed by a screech of lordly tire. Finding himself most dreadfully in the open, McX dives into one of the disused weirs, struggles in the winter water to remove his shoes, floats close to the old concrete wall. An unutterable feeling. Naked toes against green, brown, mossy. What fish might come? An opulent motor car speeds along the path over McX's wet head, dromedary coat, and of course, cigarettes. He soaks until he is sure the motor will not return. A green door opens in one of the crazy golf cottages, and a manny in a worn official cap wanders down to the water, a worn official dog with him. The weir keeper of all things. You can't stay in there all day. I can pay you, says McX. An unknowable hour in the dark, narrow Scotland of the night, which has filled McX's brain and bed. Some motion, and he wakes to find Siobhan is next him. He half turns, as he always wishes to do, and finds this is not Siobhan, who is always cool as the linen, not Siobhan, who brings Highland shadows to their bed. She is feverish and clammy. If she weren't so chill, McX might almost think he lay next to himself, roasting on the blanket. Siobhan turns and twists in a way he has never seen nor imagined she could. It's me, says McX. All right. Siobhan cannot hear him. She is turning. She is wet. Perspiration and tears. What's the matter? Don't. Siobhan shakes, heaves like a small animal with a disease. McX turns from her, his eyes wide and shoulders hunched in bewilderment. He is chastened and deeply frightened. Siobhan reeks of many moonlight cigarettes, sherry and gin. McX imagines her lying in front of the fireplace or reeling about the kitchen she loves. Siobhan smells like McPint. McX begins to weep. Turfed out. That's what. McX stands and smokes on the broken concrete step of the cottage, looking across the fields to the wood, towards his lordship's crabbed castle. Here in this house, among these trees, in these fields, here in the snow and muck, which down inside him he loves, life isn't possible. Love is condemned to be a Scotsman. All the Scots are down in hell, swaying back and forth, even the ticket manny crying out, "Forgive us, Lord, we didna ken, we didna ken." And the Lord in heaven looks over the edge of his throne and says, "Well, you ken it now." The Kai come over to the fence to and smoking object which stares back at them. No happiness here. Not among trees this pretty, or in the geometric spaces between McX's shed and the cottage and the old byre. Of course not. Might have known. A scrabbling noise and a whimper. From the hedge that runs alongside the ditch comes a rabbit, far gone in myxomatosis, its eyes dead pink balls. A little legacy from my lord through the agency of Winterskill and Grant. McX smokes and stares, helpless at the mixy rabbit. It sits, twitching, heaving its sides and crying, trying to see. When he was in the security, the warm bag of the Highland pipes of love, McX would have got a shovel and smashed the life out of this poor thing, out of charity. Now he stands and watches the rabbit try to look at him, try to sense the cottage. McX turns and looks into the windows. The Nautilus will have to leave his shell altogether. Love died in those rooms, strangled by he knows not what, killed by something wrong or secret. Love dead of apnoea. It is too much, All that hurt in there, and outside this creature heaving in agony. Clouds flee their maker across the hills towards McX and dying rabbit. Poor rabbit. Poor McX. Poor old Scotland. Oh, fine ad. The word Edinburgh. Oh, part 4. Part 4. The word Edinburgh. From Charlotte Bronte. Whoever hath seen Edinburgh with its couchant crag lion will see it again in their dreams. Whoever hath once seen Edinburgh with its couchant crag lion will see it again in their dreams. Couchant, I think. Whoever once hath seen Edinburgh with its couchant crag lion will see it again in their dreams. The word Edinburgh. If one doesn't care for dreams, one doesn't care for typography. It is a dreamy idea. Arriving in boldly cut, sore-glassed Waverley after your long journey, there is both thrill and peace to be had in contemplation of the word Edinburgh in dim sun from above. In high letters, perhaps gently curving Art Deco from the shade pen of Macintosh, the word Edinburgh is tall and lovely as Ramsay Garden, and the tall lands peopling, soldiering up the rift towards the castle. The loops and kerns at the top of such a face, the turrets and happy narrow windows of those celebrating houses. Tall as Ramsay Garden, squat as Waverley or Leith. Even Helvetica the Heartless, curse of the age, cannot entirely relieve the word Edinburgh of its nobility. In the extended letters of railway carriages, in the delicate lettering of the taxicab door, the word Edinburgh sings the city. In paint, or leaf, or forged iron, it comes as a boon and a blessing to men. The word Edinburgh flies banners from its own spikes and veins, contains all its steps and passages and closes. Leaves in the word Edinburgh catch the sun and the rain. The word is grey and strong as the castle rock, the lift of Arthur's Seat, the towers and turrets of Holyrood. Through the iron bars of the word Edinburgh may be glimpsed the headstones of Grey Friars, and through it runs the water of Leith. Capital R, capital of Scotland. Roman R, the Roman law of Edinburgh, foundation of the law of Scotland. Set in sanctuary, set in the centuries, set in Dido, the Auld Alliance. The ways it is spoken, the Edinburgh of the English train announcer, the Pluman's Embro, the Frenchman's pretty Edinburgh. Umbrellas join Macintoshes in the reign of Princes Street. The proud way it is rightly said, a word of perfect hard and soft, the rhythm and strength of a strathspey, a perfect practice of Scottish rhythm, of sad song coming and going in the life of Scotland with her moving clouds. The word Edinburgh could be played all day on a violin. The burr and the burra of the curl of the turret's lightning rod, the little barb of Scottish endings, antlers in Highland halls. The E of Edinburgh, the national standard, in a spirit safe for pronunciation of the Scottish E, none of your English A's or eeks. The word Edinburgh displays the full life and meaning of the city. Its effect on the English-speaking eye is at once familiar and foreign. The nobility of the word is well shown in Gill, and it appears in this fount in many places about the city. The word Edinburgh is a perfect portrait of the noblest city in Britain. Wherever you go, write the word Edinburgh on any convenient paper so that your eye may always find a home. Glance at it at odd times, as you might at the portrait of a friend. As the word contains the city, so the city contains all of Scotland, at once delicate, grand, bold, crude, rich, poor, natural, and artistic. Stand in Princes Street on a day of sun and cloud and say you don't see pride and humility, faith and the profane, music and noise, learning and oatmeal, beauty and squalor, a nation's history and its wretched decline into piddling commerce, each trying to kill the other. In between the shadows and glimmers, the line and curl of this word is all this country. McX's town and the mud of his ditch, what he finds among twigs. Siobhan and her childhood, McPint and his fag ends, smashed glasses of beer. Great northern metropolis, where men's noses are inflamed, dripping penises, where girls shatter like flowery china at your touch, where fresh fruit is regarded with only the deepest suspicion. It is McPint, walking in sunshine dim and early, with his hair sticking out, his cheeks unshaved, his night breath rasping in his throat. McPint sandpapers the air of the city as he walks through it. McPint has no destination in mind. His brain is sore. It drove him from his bed. There is a man in it. He is unaware of his route. Stimulated by the smell of boiling hops in the Canongate, he wanders up and down it, bumps and dings into posts and doorways like a bearing in a pinball machine. Invisible things, scenes of ancient riot, houses that no longer exist, places where men were hanged. Something happens to make him realize he has arrived at the Black Ox. He finds himself staring at its dark windows. There is a thing new and bright to behold in them. Go-go dancer, lunch times, in fluorescent orange. Scales fall from McPint's eyes. He is truly awake. Now the day takes on meaning. Now there is something to think about. What to do between now and then? Then, when he will, he can already imagine, feast the red and ferocious McPint eye on a half-naked giratrix. McPint feels heat in his groin. He looks over his shoulder to see if anyone is about, and then, via his pocket, adjusts his genital. McPint treats time like bog roll. 4 hours to murder. Their cruel end is like this. On down the Canongate goes McPint. In a newsagent's, he peruses wow until he's told to get out. A piss in the toilet of the brewery wall, down to the bottom. Holyrood stands in the forecourt and stares, briefly intrigued by the conical turrets of lead. McPint stumbles around the ruined abbey. He tries to read tombs, cranes his neck painfully, slowly perceived it used to be a building like a church. McPint accosts a guide. What happened to this place then, eh? Burnt down, sir. When? Oh, a long time ago. Long time ago stirs McPint's brose of a memory. Something. A name comes up. Cromwell. The guide sees McPint as severely hungover, that he is hungover and nationalistic. He wants an answer, a simple answer. Injustice surges out of the mild little guide. Tears well up in his eyes. Aye, Oliver Cromwell's the man responsible for that, sir. McPint, satisfied, falls over a tomb and is helped up. In the forecourt once again, McPint reflects on history, farts intermittently. He sees passing by the far gate McX, who is trying to make his way along the street but is caught up in a gathering crowd of some kind. McPint goes after him, emitting a wise crack and another fart. Oh, it's you, says McX. Aye. What you doing round here then? McX holds up his clinical case. You here to test the Queen's whiskey? Ha, across the road. But McPint and McX are now nearly immobile with thronging. McX's round corners enable him to lever himself about and inquire, what's the idea? It's the Queen, you idiot, says a toothy girl. She's coming out in a minute. McX feels a little thrill. He looks down at the crown embossed on his case, rehunches his corduroy, assumes an air of importance. He imagines being the weights and measures to the royal household, the Queen's gauger, chained to the gates of Holyrood so as to be available at any time things need measured. What about a glass of beer, says McPint. Don't you want to see the Queen? Ah, spits McPint. She's no fucking Queen. A gentleman turns to look at him. Here, sir, perhaps you've never heard of the Act of Union. Heard of it, says McPint. I've done it. No, says McX. He doesn't mean that. And it's a hell of a lot more exciting than hanging about waiting for that bitch, says McPint. In the joy of having a captive audience, McPint begins to denounce the houses of Hanover and Saxe-Coburg. Sellers out, the deaths of us all. To the king over the water, yells McPint. He jumps back and forth across a little unsavoury puddle on the ground. I'll tell you what about Charles Edward Stuart, says McX. I read it in a book that after he left us, he went to Rome and became a drink-sodden voluptuary. McPint stops hopping. Ah, nice work if you can get it, says McPint. The aristocrats have all the advantage. How red in the face McPint gets. How the idea of the Queen shakes the bones in the tombs of his forebears. Though McPint has no ancestors, being a very true, real bastard. The imminent appearance of Her Majesty has McPint foaming at the mouth. A beard of froth foams around his neck. He looks like Keir Hardie. A black car pokes at the crowd, a pastel hat behind the glass. The crowd sighs like springtime, and here is McPint jumping up and down, his bonnet in the air again and again. Hooray, hooray, hooray. As the most exuberant member of the crowd, he attracts the attention of the Duke, who waves. McPint is ecstatic. Did you see that? He cries in a high voice. That was the Duke of Edinburgh. He waved at me. McPint's eyes shine like a boy's. His life may be complete. McPint and McX find a pub in the Canongate. After his second pint of 80 shilling, McPint belches. She wasn't a bad-looking bit. In the war, used to wear fetching hats and that, fetching wee hats and that. And there was a little grey one. You mean, says McX, you fancy the Queen? Ah, says McPint, flushing. She's a bloody German, McX. Just you remember that. McPint's skin begins to crawl in the clammy sun of noon. He is nearing the Black Ox. Go-go dancer. Lunchtime. Why hasn't he, as a premium customer, been informed? He imagines what oiled kind of temptress would dance go-go for the delectation of the black ox. She will dance in a cage. There will be throbbing lavender stroboscopic light and wild and wild discorotic music featuring snorting and slobbering, just like in Aberdeen. McPint begins to salivate. He hies into view of the black ox, the orange rectangle. He pauses at the door and licks his lips. He enters to find the place stuffed with funny-looking men he has never seen before. They all look like postmen, their suits baggy and dark. They are undernourished, all unshaven and ashamed. These men are all standing there, with the same stoop of shoulder and the same glass of beer. Silence. Layers of smoke. Are they waiting for a strike vote? The news of a bomb? McPint makes his way to the bar. Pint of 80 shilling? Without drinking, he gingerly uses his glass as a periscope, a plywood box in front of the jukebox, a red reflector bulb trained on it through the smoke. Eyes steal up toward the clock. It is a minute past the appointed time. Heat, sweat, dust. Yippee-ki-yay-o. The door of the woman's bog opens, and she comes out. The men shift uneasily. She is short and has Siamese cat eyes. She was wearing where you might expect some San Tropez drug addict's idea of the lower torso heritage of the Navajo, with a towel draped round her shoulders. She is dark, McPint thinks. He thinks she is a tink. Aye, a beautiful tink named Fiona. Slowly, Fiona puts some coins into the jukebox. She stands on the plywood box and puts her towel off. The perspiring barman cranks up the red bulb. She stands professionally. She stands pre-professionally. She's been to dancing school. The men stand unprofessionally. They've never been anywhere. Well, some of them have been on the rigs, what passed today for India. Start of thump music. She raises her arms over her head, lowers her eyes in TV passion. And now the conversation begins, loudly. To a man, they all turn away from her, suddenly, in unison, stridently croaking out hastily invented talk of golf, sport, motor cars, having all crowded in. Not a single one is brave enough to look at her now, grasping her ankles, moving her bottom back and forth, displaying a demarcation of demaculation, alas and alack. Demaculation. A demarcation of demaculation, alas and alack. McPint is the only one looking. He is facing her, and 200 men are facing him. 200 postmen staring through him, or perhaps trying to see the reflection of what she is doing in McPint's eyeballs. The pint was dear. McPint feels bound to watch, but they're all looking at him. He feels on stage. Her attitudes are few in number, invites you to her breasts, demonstrates the line of her torso as if she is the latest refrigerator, bottom of breast to thorax. Wraps one leg around air as though you or some extension of you. Now bends, is being had by not you, too violent, some muscular bloke in threatening underwear from Empire Stores, and begins again. McPint blushes salmon, struggles upstream against the faces. He can hardly hear the music for the chatter. He cools his face in his glass, Hiss. Looks again. Wow. Hiss. Wow. Hiss. The coins run out. The red bulb dims immediately. No applause. She is red in the face. With moist brow and lip, she takes the towel, mopping herself like a boxer. In the once again dead hot silence, she trips into the toilet, the pasteboard door of which shuts. Kaponk. Expensive embarrassment. McPint furiously gulps the rest of his 80 shilling, which is hot in his hand. Another. In 20 minutes' time, she, according to the orange rectangle, will come out and grasp her ankles again. What's she going to do for all that time? Sit on the bog? Laugh at them all? Cry her eyes out? Secret Scotsman. The city of Edinburgh is a salubrious abode for the secretive personality, who keeps himself to himself and from himself, quickly finds a companion in this warrened, winded, stared place, which discloses its delights and shames only when it knows you, and then by accident, by slow degree. The secret soul may take a particular interest and pleasure in creeping, the method of which may be learnt from old films. To creep, under cover of night or mist, is a thrilling way to get about. Chance encounters and pre-existing appointments are charged with greater interest, with piquancy, if one has crept there, close to a wall with hand outstretched or a sleeve obscuring the face. Creeping of a superior sort may be accomplished in Advocate's Close, a frightening haunted valley, in Lady Stairs Close, mist hanging on its Corby steps, turrets and lamps, or down Castle Wynd to the grass market, mysterious and ugly. Truly horrifying creeping may be done under the bridges and along the Cowgate, but here other creepers may be encountered, creepers who creep for reasons beyond pastime. Creeping is a reasonable way of defying authority. A policeman might apprehend you creeping, but in the absence of any evidence of wrongdoing in the vicinity, what charge could be brought? Wasting police time. Method, creeping. But you have nettled them, even when they are invisible. To creep is to give yourself importance, to assert the complexity of human life against the impassivity of the elements. What better demonstration to the sun, the moon, the castle, the vapours and forbidding stones of a gigantic city that you are not as small and simple as you look? On a day thick with fog and coal smoke, Totemic Smith chooses, after creeping along King Stables Road, haunting the Grassmarket sight unseen, even though it is mid-morning, to creep up Castle Wynd with his hand stretched out, crabbed, following slowly up the steps through broken bottles and pools of the urine of several species. The castle only barely sensible, a stern thing behind clouds. Before landing on Castle Hill, he passes an inert man, a terrier so cold Totemic Smith sees it decide not to bite him, a man in bus driver's uniform and a hairy called China Pig in Congress. His ticket machine is dropped to the stone step. She is wearing his cap. They too decide not to bite him. Arrival of Totemic Smith on Lawn Market. Dim, behind a whole library of fogs, dejected blue banners droop over the portal of the castle, an intriguing arch beyond which there might just as well be empty space. A pinpoint of light moves like a will-o'-the-wisp at certain intervals up and down, the brakeman's lamp on a dreadful train disappearing forever in swirling har. It is the cigarette of Totemic Smith. Totemic Smith outlined, impassive, against the resonant grey. What is totemic about Totemic Smith? He is large, rumpled, friendly, cynical, bearish, sometimes crapulous. Since he is large, he is a totem. The punks can find goodness in the large people and issues of the world, though not all of them have goodness. Totemic Smith's traditional brogues are size 12. They hark back to the more ancient qualities. Totemic Smith is a declaimer of poetry in Scots. He has been ejected from drinking shops for this. Totemic Smith is a communist. Totemic Smith is an artist. All day, every day, with most of the day a hangover in a metal shed in Oxgangs, he besieges canvas. Perhaps here is cruel in a rage to extirpate the city of the night before. Totemic Smith is not liked by gallery women. He falls down too much at his openings. But isn't that where we all fall down? This is not important as long as he can purchase Air Amour, coffee syrup, 80 shilling, and paints, which he manages to do just. On the canvases of Totemic Smith, as McPint has discovered to his pain and derangement, Clyde steamers have legs to march on and mouth to play bagpipes made of crisp wrappers and whiskey bottles. Dundee shopgirls who would titillate McPint alone, their skirts pulled up and their makeup smudged, are ravaged by big nuclear submarines on the steep side of Ben Lomond in a dream of heather. We ticket mannies, agape in fear, are attacked by lurching, churl-shouldered men wearing joke-shop masks of the Prime Minister. Black clouds boil in the skies of Totemic Smith. On the misty horizon, the fog manny has made. Rusting shipyard cranes hang, and falcon-like beaks of beer fonts brood. Englishmen are burnt at stakes, and Charles Edward Stuart looks on from the summit of Ben Vraki. Blood streams from under his kilt, his sporran stuffed with American money. Totemic Smith fades from the street corner, where the only proof of life has been the rumble of what sound like taxicabs. He appears in an old building and follows up a dark spiral stair, green enamel. To live and wander long enough in fog is to shuck your corporeality, Totemic Smith says as he climbs. In vapor, citizens of the city may freely mix with its ghosts, many of whom are distinguished and historical figures, especially on misty days, of which there are many. Totemic Smith emerges into the fog again on the roof. He can make out a wee manny in a faded uniform with a ticket machine around his neck. This way, sir, that's 50 pence. Good morning, sir. Thanking you. Totemic Smith enters a humped black turret. Inside, a round white screen on which he looks down from a balcony. He comes here most days. The wee manny shuts the door behind him. How are you the day, sir? Not so bad. The manny turns off the lights and pulls an old brass lever. Above them, an iron iris squeaks, opens, a shaft of grey light falls on the screen, mist comes in and swirls around. On the screen, a murky suggestion of the castle, hiding. Welcome to Edinburgh, Athens of the North, says the manny. And as the poet said, precipitous. Stuff that, Mark, says Totemic Smith. Sir, it's only me. You know me. I do, I don't want the tour. I have to give the lecture, sir. It wouldn't be right. Totemic Smith gives the manny £1 for your trouble. Oh, well, all right, sir, seeing as it's you, but didn't tell anybody you came in here and didn't get the history. I know the fucking history, says Todd Smith. That's right, sir. You do. Now, what would you like to see the day? Castle Wind, says Todd Smith. Moving his lever, the Manny searches with his great lens up and down the steps of Castle Wind. But China Peg and the bus driver have gone. So has the inert man, and it seems the little dog has died. But what they do find is McPint emerging from the black ox and following a girl in a hat. McPint has a liking for ladies in hats. Unfortunately for him, how few are worn. He has newspaper pictures yellowing of years and years of Royal Ascot, which excite him still. McPint will follow a woman in a hat for miles, no matter what she looks like. If she's wearing a hat, that's enough for him, and he wants her. McPint is often successful in this obsession. Do women wear hats with an understanding of men like McPint? Or on the lookout for? Despite his vigorous ugliness, "That's a nice hat you're wearing," is often sufficient to get him a bed for the night after a drink. And never a lass is objected to keeping her chapeau on for him during the shouting. McPint's interest in hats has been exploited commercially by someone in that sort of business. Toward the rear of a dubious publication, McPint found an advertisement for special interest hats. Highest quality catalogue sent in plain envelope. Feverishly, McPint sent £4, refundable with first order. In a week, the postie brought a large envelope. McPint locked himself, wildly smoking, into the bog to examine the contents. He bulged, furious, rampant at what he saw. Easter bonnets of white kid with razor-blade rims, opera hats in patent leather, a wide-brimmed summer hat of studded red crocodile worn by a wanton English rose who pouted. McPint must order. To hell with the budget. He chose the black opera and with trembling hands estimated the size of the long-suffering Mrs. McPint's head. He filled in the form and sent a sweaty postal order to fetch the thing, like a cur. The sub-shame he felt in the sub-post office, although the name of the place was innocent enough, She-Hats of London. McPint felt all the men and women of the Royal Mail stare suspiciously at him. London. London. You can get anything in London, McPint told himself. He drank heavily and drooled for a week. He worried about being on such a depraved mailing list. What kind of devils run such a place? He feared they might show on his doorstep, wanting, oh God. But what, he then thought, is the real harm of such an enterprise? Is it the measure of a civilization's decadence or merely its intricacy? A box arrived. McPint bore it in to the long-suffering Mrs. McPint, who was flushed that morning with lateness. What's this? A present? She was in such a bad mood this made no impression, although it was a bastard well unusual event. Aren't you going to open it? Oh, all right. Enormously the wrong moment, but McPint is ever uncontrollable. The anticipation, she unwrapped, opened. Oh! She got red and acted rushed. What is it with hats? She yelled. Try it on. It didn't fit. That was all there was to it. Even so, McPint was thrilled. He needed Mrs. McPint there and then. The hat absorbed, blocked out her specky shoulders, her tired slip. But she was late. She began to scold him. You'll have to return it. It's non-returnable. What? It says here, made to order. You're mad. You're an idiot. How much did this cost? McPint wouldn't tell her. He was ashamed. She had deeply shamed him. McPint, ashamed. She saw her chance. She beat her breast. Talked of irresponsibility, the price of fossil fuels. Ethiopia. McPint was full of remorse. He wanted to give her an amount of money, the price of the hat, but he hadn't got it. He imagined begging on the street. He was confused because the idea had welled up in him, as it did from time to time, that marriage was for some kind of private fun, once in a while. Even his marriage, honest fun, no matter how expensive. The long-suffering Miss McPint stormed out in a flustered way McPint had great distaste for. He had a fear that as they grew older, Mrs. McPint would one day become a little powdered, lavender-watered Scotswoman you might see on the train, going frequently to the toilet to apply more rouge and always saying, "Ooh." Mrs. McPint knows about the other girls and wishes the hat wearing could be left to them. It messes her hair. McPint brimmed with horror at himself. He stared out the window. Rain. He had suddenly to get some money, pay her so she could buy something, must make money. He went into town in complete confusion. His stomach churned on the bus. He cried all day, imperceptibly. He was ashamed of himself and angry with love for his wife. Once again, wearing the heavenly raiment of marriage, as if it were a hair shirt. Totemic Smith and the Manny watch McPint in the meadows, following the girl with the hat. The Manny works the levers. Nice bourgeoisie, says Totemic Smith. He's weaving a bit, says the Manny. McPint is weaving, part with 80 shilling, part with hat infatuation, but most because he is still being driven mad by the idea he is living in Totemic Smith's head and Totemic Smith in his. Anything else? Says the wee Manny. Time's almost up, sir. Take me down Playfair steps, says Totemic Smith. I've an idea for a painting there. The Manny throws the levers. They take a crazy angled stroll up and down the steps. The mist is giving a bit now. There's a girl selling drawings in pastel, some real sunlight on her face, and some on the bright stone of the National Gallery. Stuff that, please, says Totemic Smith. Leaning on the railings, a familiar round of shoulder. McX. Staring up and away toward Carlton Hill. He's moving slightly. There's a glint of light on his cheek. He's crying. Time's up, sir. Really. Night, Edinburgh. Tall out, unceasing Edinburgh bell of evening. Tall out my fright, Edinburgh bell of night. Beer is not always to be found, satisfactory beer. Totemic Smith moves up Candlemaker Row. Beer abounds to the naked eye, but at the wrong location, the wrong hour, your glass is filled with tears, noise, blood, history, or the findings of crime. Therefore, correct beer must be found, and in this Totemic Smith is skilled. It is a blowy, cool night. He moves across the meadows, away from the centre of the city. Away and beyond, into twilight he walks, passing hundreds of dirty, calm public houses, as though they weren't there. Totemic Smith passes the time by impersonating for himself drunks I have known. He walks such a distance across and along the city that he finally comes to the Taj Mahal. It glows opalescent in the moonlight. Ah, says Totemic Smith, red flocket walls and pints o' lager. He peruses the offerings, but this is stupid. He kens what he wants. Capiscum, capiscum, dominus vobiscum. So hot you drink a pint after every bite. He appeals to the waiter. Very, very hot, says the waiter. Aye, I can. But no starter. Nothing to start, sir. In shame, Totemic Smith mumbles, no. The waiter snatches at the utensils. He flings them away in anger. A pint of your best lager and lime, says Totemic Smith. The waiter sweeps wine glasses furiously away and goes to chew them up in his mouth in the kitchen. Totemic Smith breaks up poppadoms and forms them in a tangram. The cricketarium, a diorama. Kirk Yetholm, Village Green, 3 years before. Totemic Smith plants his glass in recreation of the sun, setting on his moment of triumph. He selects a burnt sliver, the Jamaican bowler. Gloom and despair rage among the teammates of Totemic Smith. We were battling for our honour, he tells himself. Our best had gone down, and I was next. A bell in the deep-throated clock tower, the pepper mill, began to chime as I raised my bat, oil-sleek, dark victory. Totemic Smith's fingers reenact the crucial moment through the magic of poppadom poetry, but voices of unrest are coming from the till. What do you mean, no? A much worsened for wear McPint is clutching the formica's edge, moving from side to side before the two short priests of the Taj Mahal. We cannot sell to you, please. You must go now, please. Totemic Smith has come in at the end of this. Kirk Yetholm is packed up and sent back to the borders. McPint's brain rearranges his vertebrae so he is an inch taller. He just manages to peer over the till. There is value in peering. He fixes the priest with the McPint eye. The man shrinks back. It is a terrible thing to behold. Who made you? Says McPint. Who made you? Dramatic pause, omnes. The British. Just remember that. McPint turns and walks, stately, out of the great marble chamber, out, away under the moon of India, to conquer some other subcontinent of drink. There is a man in his head. What if he had known about Mrs. McPint and Balaja Prasad? That man's miserable, says Totemic Smith. He begins to quote bloodied bone shards of McDermott. Totemic Smith conceives his uncle needs visited. Duly he goes. A vapour-lit maze of streets built on small hills. Totemic Smith's uncle is no very well. He's sick in the head. He is a native of Bridgeton, Glasgow, yet he believes he is a St. Kilda man. He thinks he lives in St. Kilda. So read yourself up. Hirta, a white bungalow. The door is opened by a haggard woman. Hello, aunt, says Totemic Smith. Ooh. That McEwen's export. Hello, aunt, says Totemic Smith. She is destroyed. It was never supposed totemism was integral to the Smith family. Totemic Smith follows her to a door. She picks up an implement and blows on it, a deep, two-toned signal. Totemic Smith gives her an aggrieved look. The voice of an elderly man from within. Ah, the mail boat! He thinks we are the supply boat, Dunara Castle, says Totemic Smith's aunt. Try to act accordingly. I've never been a supply boat, says Totemic Smith. In this suburban sitting room, they find a little man of 70 with a white beard, no moustache, a ruined suit of heavy tweed. He is trying to kindle a fire out of peats on the coffee table. "Dinna worry, it's too damp," says the aunt lowly. "News from the mainland! Coal, food, tobacco," sings the uncle. He is delighted to see them through his little spyglass. "Hello, uncle," says Totemic Smith. He notices a chicken walking behind the settee. "What's that chicken doing?" "Wheesht, it's a fulmar. Please refer to it as such," says the aunt. "Fulmar? I could use a meal," says the uncle. "He thinks he has to catch and eat him like they did on St. Kilda," explains the aunt. "He dreams in Gaelic tea." "He does?" The uncle climbs slowly up onto the settee. With his glass, he peers down the back of it. "A nest!" he cries. He begins to crawl down the other side of the furniture, paying out a rope. "How is Uncle, Aunt?" says Totemic Smith. "Completely by himself." "Ah!" from behind the couch, scuffling. "Lovely weather," offers Totemic Smith. "The nights are fair, drawing in new," says the aunt. A sharp cry from behind the sofa and the unfamiliar sounds of bird strangle. "I've got you!" Feathers float up and munching is heard. "Isn't he going to cook that?" asks Totemic Smith, annoyed. "Well, he can't get his peats going, you see," says the aunt. "It's the damp." By the fire, tea and a shovel load of commercial dainties. The aunt, of course, is glad to see her nephew. He is someone to distract her from her lot in life. But as an artist, Totemic Smith is suspicious of the fireside. In Scotland, they try to trick you into sitting by the fire, where you will doze after eating fried food and glutinous cake, where you will not, cannot read dangerous books or make art. Or if you can manage it, it will be cute fireside art, postcard Kai. You will tie tartan ribbon on the kittens of the world. Totemic Smith eats 11 wee sandwiches. They will be represented visually tomorrow as oppressors. But he knows he cannot linger by the fire or his art will be destroyed. Cloaked inside an immense digestive rumble, we hear, "I must get along, Aunt." "A dram before you go?" "Oh, well." They sup in the vestibule. The door to St. Kilda opens. An awful stink. The uncle smokes a coal in his pipe. He stares at Totemic Smith. Glasses are put down, hawsers thrown. Totemic Smith's whistle sounds. He leaves this little bay and turns towards the Hebrides. Rotation of the hour hand finds him in the Western Isles, bare and old-fashioned drinking shop. He is well served by quick men in uniforms. There is naught here to distract you from 80 shilling. 80 shilling, the colour of old copper and of trench-rousingly bitter taste. Yet smooth and creamy, like the sea by St. Andrews, or better, the ocean boiling beneath Dunnottar, for it laps at death, scouring the spine and abrading the soul. Some believe the soul lives in the cortex and not the pulmonary cavity. In even the stoutest 80 shilling eventually snaps something, some Tay-bridge of civilization, and anger, ill judgment, and wrong thinking result. 80 shilling is the primum mobile. Todd McEwen. 80 shilling is the primum mobile of McPint, and all men are like him. It never makes Totemic Smith mean, for he is not a mean molecule to be excited. There is the question of cruelty to his canvases and the public, but Totemic Smith eddies in quiet pools off the river in question. He must drink to create the difficulties which keep him there and keep him in work. The pints in the Western Isles rocket back, the arms of all in unison. The lilt and crash of life in here becomes garish and mad to Totemic Smith. We'll soon be painting. The public house stars descend on him. I have a great hunger, says Totemic Smith. Aye, a great hunger for life, for tropical seas, Chilean women, chocolate fondue, gritty, futurist lithography, Calvados, poems, sandwiches, buyers, fires. Oh, a great hunger for it I cannae ignore. Perhaps back across the city, windy and late with night. Totemic Smith's path is blocked at a certain junction by two reeling figures who prove to be McAitchison and his small, deafening dog, Noisette. Figures of controversy. Sir, my friend, won't you join us? He indicates his stupid dog. Totemic Smith has only contempt for McAitchison, haggard and degenerate tool of imperialism who seeks to atone under the cloak of art. All right, says Totemic Smith. One of these scenes it is hard to remember or put a name to ensues in the flat of McAitchison, poor with the atmosphere of dog and damp book. It is not an exchange of views, but a tableau in which McAitchison ties Noisette to a chair and then stumbles about the room, regularly tripping over the dog in a melodramatic search for a bottle he has hid somewhere and never finds. A pretend gentleman, McAitchison has some sort of war record which titillates in shadow. It is rumoured McAitchison foiled the plot to kill Hitler, or that Hitler bungled an attempt on McAitchison. All as may be, on the map and in capitals, that war is over, but it is fought every day by millions in the bars of Britain. If McAitchison had done what they say and is what they think, then we would not know him. He would live in a brick house with hermetic glazing and many hedges in Kent, England, the anonymous headquarters of faded history and military nocturnal emission. He wouldna be bumbling around Edinburgh late in the night with his uncontrollable Doug. How is your work coming along? Says McAitchison. I'm thirsty, says Totemic Smith. Oh, aye, it'll just be crash. Now, where did I... You know, when I was in the army... In his chair, Totemic Smith thinks, it's my fun night. Down Candlemaker Row, the wind blows to Totemic Smith the keenings of citizens in the Cowgate. The gate of Greyfriars squeaks and sings. Wha'd pass a screeching graveyard yet at night deserves what he gets. Totemic Smith stops to light a cigarette, and the wind brings him a little symphony of the past and the life of the city. A window or bottle crashes. A child screams. An argument begins. The horn of a motor car honks angrily. Totemic Smith, to all Edinburgh. Can you no hear the pipes? Who the devil? In that quarter of the city called Oxgangs, it is a night in a lane of ancient garages and crazed sheds. It is cold. Totemic Smith has stuffed old canvases into obvious cracks, something like McX on holiday. Flood lamps hang from rafters here and there. They illuminate the loose pink curves of China Pig, who tiredly smokes a cigarette and poses without much art. She is semi-consciously draped in a short skirt over an assortment of totemic junk, a child's army tank, a collection of toy soldiers, a plush Scotty toy, several cases of whiskey, a Victorian fireplace of oak Totemic Smith has found, a stolen headstone, tartan bunting, a rusty tin of Air Namor. Totemic Smith at the easel. His large hand clutches brushes and knives. Right-handed, left-brained. A left-brained painter. Scottish legacy. As this painting takes shape, the tank gets bigger, China Pig smaller. The tartan becomes a border around the canvas edge, and several political borders. The Tweed, France, Korea, the border between men and women. What about a cup of tea? Says China Pig. Her back is beginning to hurt. Odd, her most used thing. Hold on. Using a fan brush, Totemic Smith makes a cloud he knows in the Hebrides of the colours he used for the tartan. Totemic Smith knows tartan. His mother and father are experts in its provenance. Totemic Smith grew up in the rear of tartan discount supply, Leith. He spent his childhood among Highland brogues made of plastic and thin little kilts of horrible great safety pins in them. Aye, for the tourists. The mind of Totemic Smith was punctured by safety pins long before the rising of the punks. Totemic Smith works slowly, with his mother's movements, the same care she uses when straightening things in her shop, or kitting out Hamish, the display dummy. Hamish, the gurning with the nose of chipped plaster. Hamish has the worst toupee in all Edinburgh, and that is saying something. He figures still in Totemic Smith's dreams, never speaking, but always there with his rug and chipped, blank look. When Totemic Smith's parents die, he plans to bring Hamish to the shed. Hamish figures as hero in much of his work. Totemic Smith puts down his brush and moves towards the electric kettle. His hands are rough. He realizes it is cold. Are you cold? I'll just put on the heat lamp. A red bulb from Woolies, Totemic Smith's idea of winter warmth. Last year it was a creative heating liniment. There went his grant from the Arts Council. Oh, yes, please, says China Pig. She manages a faint smile. She draws a piece of the bunting around her shoulders, for warmth slips on her plastic high heels and goes over to the kettle. The two gather round it. She has not looked at the easel. Paintings are always the same to her, but Totemic Smith pays more than she could make in an alley the night. All the same, she looks Totemic Smith over and calculates. How about a go when you finish? Totemic Smith studies China Pig through his thick spectacles and the little murk of tobacco smoke about his sandy head where he keeps his own constellations. She has modelled for him many times. He considers her a friend, though he has a secret interest in her doings up and down the stairs and closes of Edinburgh. She is smoking, which is sex. Relation of bones to lungs to breasts, black, the usual colour of her clothes, the musculature and sexual X-ray. She has an appealing scrawniness, hardness. Her sticky hair is streaked rat blonde. Totemic Smith likes her for her hardness, better shown in her spirit than her body, which is tough but ultimately frail. Totemic Smith believes in Celtic women, as he believes in all symbols. She sells something intimate to eat, but China Pig is Celt and woman and keeps herself whole. He wakes from himself and surveys the effect of the tarting bunting on her. She widens her eyes. That's quite good. That's quite good. Aye. Keep that on just as it is when we get back on it. Get back to it. China Pig makes a pout and a wee snort. It'd be a pleasure. I'm freezing, but what about it? What about what? A wee go when you're done. Oh, well, I don't know. It wouldn't be good for my concentration. Measly bugger. Look, I'm paying you just the same. I know. He likes her in the bunting bolt from Tartan Discount Supply. It is consummate with his subject. He imagines Hamish might fancy her. The kettle boils. Totemic Smith pours tea for China Pig. For himself, he fills a mug, half of coffee syrup and half of sterilized cream. China Pig, shivering, sips the tea and studies the painting. This is sick, you ken that? That's so. What does she know about painting anyway? Do you get a lot of money for a painting like that? Totemic Smith considers. What is a lot of money? No. How much like? Say £300. £300, you bollocker! Do you know how many blokes up against a wall that is? He doesn't know, but from now on, Totemic Smith resolves to measure the value of art in China Pig's way. How many blokes against an alley wall on a freezing Edinburgh night? We'd best get on. This is going to take a while. Oh, well. In Oxgangs, it is now Scotland of the night. The yellow vapour wind claws at the shed. Or is it something else? A man? It is, rattling at the door, and now hammering. What the hell? Says Totemic Smith, putting down his brush. He opens the metal door. The wind scrapes in and shaves him. In the dark are little white eyes, set far back in the deep red glow of a face. The man stares at Totemic Smith. His eyes shoot past to the light where China Pig pulls her bunting around her. Woo! Hairy though she is, there is a little lavender-watered Scotswoman in there. What can I do for you? Says Totemic Smith. You fucking bastard! The door open, wind abrading the three of them. Totemic Smith's spectacles stare at a man that doesn't seem to like him. I don't think I know you. And McPint comes in. His turnip nose and ear hair ablaze in his brusque, squat body. For some reason, he removes his cap. Totemic Smith shuts the door, but not for wanting this man to stay. McPint breathes in and out hard. He is in his most equilibrious state, fulmination. He throws his weight back and forth between his balls and his feet balls. He puts his hands in and out of his pockets. Totemic Smith sees he has an erection. What gives you the right? Says McPint. He breathes harder, begins thrusting his fat fingers this way and that in the chill air. What gives you the right? Right to, says Totemic Smith. Oh yeah? What gives you the right to come bursting in here, says China Pig. What are you talking about, says Totemic Smith. What do you want? I've seen your paintings. Oh, aye, says McPint. It's an outrage, a public outrage. I saw them in the museum next to tapeworms where they belong. And let me tell you something. Those tapeworms are fine, solid men of the world compared with you, you fucking bastard son of a bitch. I'd like to flay the skin off your miserable bones and shove it right up you. Look at that, says McPint, staring at the easel with fear. You've sold us out. Aye, you've shown everybody our weaknesses. The English. Aye, we've no defences left for bastards like you corrupting us from inside. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. What kind of a man are you? You can just bugger off right now, says China Pig, before I call the police. Aye, says McPint, turning on her. I ken you, the dirty, disgusting whore was in all this bastard's paintings, displaying your Ronnie man's body for £1. I bet you have to pay him to take your clothes off. He's the only one who will, and I bet you go down on him too when his filthy work is done. The way McPint speaks, he is practically vomiting. His face is crimson, and he staggers. I ken you both, he keeps saying. You've no business here at all, says China Pig. If he'll no throw you out, I will. Come on and you try, you bit hairy, says McPint. I'll bite your tits off, I will. In a second, China Pig is on him. What do you know about painting anyway, she screams. What gives you right to come in here like a bloody maniac, disturbing folk what's trying to make a great statement like Mr. Smith? Statement, yells McPint. The truth, says China Pig. This man tells the truth about all you back alley buggers. "Ah, ken you rat-faced, degenerate pervert. Oh, aye." He is strong. He hurts her, but she is quick. The point of her battered, hairy high heel in his nutsack. McPint groans and folds. Oh, a stain on his trews. It has come to Totemic Smith that he knows this man, aye, from following his progress through the city, from the panorama, and from the Taj Mahal. This is frightening to Totemic Smith, to see this man who had already become a subject, a squat, determined drunk, shouldering his way among the closes and temptations of a corrupted Edinburgh. Totemic Smith drops his cup and brushes. "Right, you." Totemic Smith pounds over to McPint and picks him up like a dollop of pipe clay. With McPint struggling and cursing in his arms, he nods to China Pig, who drags open the door. "I'll bloody kill you! I'll fucking kill the both of you buggers!" screams McPint. Totemic Smith lifts McPint high above him, McPint biting at his face. Totemic Smith heaves him backward and then throws him, a mile like, as if to throw him out of life, out of the world. McPint smashes into a stone wall in the old crazy alley. He mumbles and tries to get up, but can't. His arm will not work. He lies shuddering in a lot of blood, weeping. "All right," he says. "All right, you have to come inside my head to show the world what I'm thinking. What right to show the world what I'm like?" "Jesus Christ," says China Pig. Totemic Smith bars the door and switches off the lights, except the heat lamp. In its dark red, he lifts China Pig onto a stool after slowly draping the bunting around her scratched shoulders and breasts. They have a go. They both face the canvas, China Pig examining it in earnest now. Done, he pats her hair, buttons his trousers, and rushes for the easel. He sets to work, fast, hard, sweating, screwy. During the night, McPint appears on the canvas, crouched, sailing through Scotland of the night as he did from the door, over street lamps, chippies, black brassieres, newspapers, tooth-torn fleshes, and the intimater flanks of China Pig. "That's another £10 you owe me," she says as dawn comes. Yes. Rain, Edinburgh. Rain, ever. And as it falls, you must fight your way up the streets through an additional element, a grey spiritual aspic which seeps from the core of Edinburgh. Your shoes leaden like your heart. The end of the world's sorrowful aspirations impends, depends, and dangles from the top of every Edinburgh rain-soaked hill. On these days, no one dares raise a proud remark or head, or curl a lip or nostril over the dull flatlands of Lothian or Fife. The thrilling glory of doom all Scotland rides on, the limits of life, are unavoidable on these heavy days. Like the infrequent bus, they must be taken. Pitch and roll of steamy bus interior, jingle of bell, snarl of babe, spit of cat, honk of adolescent. Outside, the sky glowers and lowers, it seems, to the very roof of the bus. Yet another ticket to be bought. On it, a wee manny, a mascot, thick thighs in a uniform, his face, through tired printing, a skull, a little death's head. Go by bus, an unfortunate effect, threw me the way. Outside in the rain, a vegetable stall. Cauliflowers glow dully. A pyramid of aubergines brags of strength and taste like cannonballs. What's this? One's moving. Behind the vegetables, sitting on a low stool, the Pakistani. It's his shop. His dark head an Urdu-speaking aubergine. What a fright. There are many who live in this weather all the time, trapped in it. One day they walked in and never left. It's not so difficult walking up George Street in merciless weather. You enter the rain world through its one-way door. Then you live in it, and it in you, forever. You're mad. You're a dafty. You become a little mad dafty, haunting Rose Street in the bit hours, hiding among memorials in Princess Street gardens. If you're a lucky dafty, you have a tiny sooty mass murderer's flat in Tall Cross. Occasionally in the town you want a cup of tea and the toilet. But is that your due in Edinburgh? Such a day. McPint and McX in a noisy cafe near Queen Street. Having been thrown finally out of the last most bend-the-law public house they could lay their hands on. McX is silent. McPint drunk, also silent, irascible and flushed. McPint has got bashed up somehow. He has bruises on his face and his right arm is in a sling. Not something one speaks of. Despite this, McPint had been hoping for a lunch-hour punch-up and hadn't got it. Too many pound peely-wallies, he said. His name for the young men of St. Andrew's Square, they of the pallid neckties. McPint tried to drag McX across town to a particularly disgusting all-day, but McX refused. Although they got as wet in the space of 2 streets as they would have going the 2 miles, bus or no, it rains in the buses as well, so you'll feel no relief in getting one, taking up space, wasting time, the curse of the little death's head. McX has a letter full of rain from Siobhan. He keeps fingering it in the pocket of his sodden jacket, his fingers across that Highland handwriting. His cigarette sputters with wet. McPint's fag is wet too and stinks like cremation all over the cafe, which isn't inappropriate. The tea is damp. It can hardly be drunk. It is grey, not brown, a tepid distillate of the city and the day. Actually, they're fit to be tied. And across from them is a dafty. Young for a dafty, but well inside the everlasting rainhoose of the head. It's hard enough seeing dafties in their rainhooses on clear days, but to see one when you're on the threshold of the thing yourself, the heaviness outside. The dafty is making signs or drawings in a notebook. He's quite far gone, for he's using a nib and pen and a bottle of ink. He's a pen and ink dafty. Spread about him at his table, other of his dafty things, a smooth rock for caressing in doorways at night, or at the absolute back of the top of a bus. A vegetable, a broken piece of enamel tile, a little box which might contain more dafty pen points, or something else, awful, or even more awful. Nothing. The dafty makes his calculations, or hieroglyphs, frequently looking up at people, including McPint and McX. McPint can't take this. If McX is paying attention to the dafty, he will do 2 things. Part of McX will file away a few observations on the dafty. McX thinks he is a keen observer of men. However, what McX sees in men is only himself, only those parts of them which are like parts of him. He will put away a few remarks on the dafty to be dragged out for some pub woman of the future, and for a moment McX will ruminate on the plight with poor, hameless dafties, and put this into his ongoing neural lament for Scotland, which echoes in him all night. Bong, bong. Fingering the damp letter from Siobhan, McX also feels he or she may become a dafty. When he has been angry with her, when they're told what to do, the would-be modern Scotsman in McX resents her. He has wanted to call her mad. Despite his love for her, he becomes frightened. Her hands. Siobhan runs her hands across the cover of an old book, her fingers flat on the worn leather, back and forth. Never has he seen someone touch things so emotionally. But this is not the miser's touch, not the coveter's, not the child's. This is someone taking to her heart only the oldest things, the sickest creatures, the pieces of lace, the ancient jewelry just about to leave the world. She smooths her hair and whispers soothingly to them on their deathbeds. With her small caress, she removes an invisible dust which obscures the life of things which she sees into. The movements of Siobhan's hands on an old thing are her fingers lightly wafting the water of a dark pool. She peers at the bottom. At the time of stubble fields, she brings in discarded corn stalks. For some hours arranges them in a pail by the fire to give them a last home, to think of her tenderness towards some odd little thing she has found. When she and McX looked in a jeweller's window, he would want to move in on a moment. Jewels don't much interest a man trying to figure out if he has enough money for the messages and a pint. But his squirming was often thwarted, then embarrassed and hushed by her soft staying, her gaze at not some fine piece, but a dusty brooch whose tiger's eye is nearly asleep, a ring worn thin, the agate become dull and stewy as the quarry of its birth, or a little cameo whose face is finally tired of its unskilfulness and prays for its next sale to be its last. She has the same caress for leaves in autumn. When she places them in her leaf press, surely she is pressing them next to her heart. And she has touched her coat and boots that way when pulling them on to hasten outside at the cry of an injured bird. She deserves to be loved for this, by anyone. The blessing of her hand for the world's bereft objects, the homeless, sneered at things, all the victims of fashion and the cruel striving for profit. With slow strokes of her small, tapered fingers, she apologizes to these unbelongings for the treatment they got at the clumsy, grasping hands of us all. And God help McX for the times she has touched him that way. He knows it. But wasn't her love for him born of that other love? Around the corners of McX's eyes, you may see traces of his funeral. His corduroy jacket, ever hanging dromedarically on him, seemed to her his winding sheet. So this unique gentleness has angered McX. Taken on the face of things, judged the way everyone he knows would judge, Siobhan is a dafty. McX's temptation to dismiss her saddens him. His beard droops low, lower here in the cafe. But McPint cannot stand this fairly chap looking at him any longer, writing about him, perhaps caricaturing him in some dafty way in the wet book. McPint's soul bristles. He is iron filings, the dafty a red and yellow magnet. Dafties know they irritate men like McPint, men who are on the rotten lower rungs of the ladder but believe with secret passion in the upper rungs and want the whole to be fumigated. McPint is getting so hot, so mad, McX feels he's sitting next to a balefire. McX sinks through fathoms of silence away from this cafe, away from McPint. Now the rain grows furious. It seems the windows must break. Across Hanover Street, a man falls. He can't get up. The wet furies of today's little doom are upon him. Help, help. In this worst of the storm, the Dafty begins to sing and to pack up. He's attracted to the violence outside. It's so like what's going on in his strangely furnished head. Begins to pack up his mad person things, his tikis, singing, still casting binocular looks at McPint. When the weather between them can't get any worse and the Dafty has shouldered his bag, he comes towards McPint. McX fears McPint will lose control, will burst. His fist creaks with clenching under the table.
I might say,
says the Dafty,
that those who fall upon the rock will merely be broken, but those on whom the rock falls will be crushed to powder.
Stunned silence. Storm continues in background. The Dafty leers at McX and the struck dumb McPint. I'll try it again. Stunned silence. Storm continues in background. The Dafty leers at McX and the struck dumb McPint and whispers,
Powder.
again before shooting towards the door. Dafty flaps flying in a queer side-to-side gait. Thunder 1,000 times louder than the midday gun explodes outside, and he's away, beckoned at by the man still lying across Hanover Street. McPint burns at both ends, at a strange angle. Did you hear that now? He says. Did you hear that about the rock? This is an outrage for McPint. Aye, says McX quietly, gazing into his awful tea.
Must be bloody off his fucking bloody rocker,
says McPint. If Siobhan were here, she would have jumped up and followed the Dafty. She often gazes unthinking, but without malice, at the unfortunate, to experience their always winter. She fights to live in the realm not of tragedy, but of hardness. She loves struggle. All around her in childhood was that battle against the elements, the landlords, the banks. Siobhan would give a fortune to spend a night among the poor folk of the Cowgate, and never, and another never to ride in a sports car or to be had to dinner. McX is thinking this. He slowly inserts his generally unsmoked cigarette into his cup of tea. That's a waste of a good cigarette, that, scolds McPint. Yes, says McX. I could have given it out to our friend before being crushed to powder. McPint doesn't get it. He stares at McX, incredulous. Excuse me, one of my cats is in distress. It stopped. Nearly there. Here she comes. Yes, says McX. I could have given it out to our friend before being crushed to powder. Kitty. Come on, pussy. No. Let me pop her into the basket. There you go. You can enjoy the end of the book. We're nearly there. No, not for me. McPint doesn't get it. He stares at McX, incredulous. This is not a laughing matter. The Dafty's warning has gone deep with McPint. He has his own visions of being crushed to powder, all right, but damned if the Dafties don't deserve it before him. I think you're a bloody bit dafty too, if you want to know, he shouts at McX. McX's grey eyes are full of rain from the letter from Siobhan in the north. He is going to go off alone and think of her, go back to his encyclopedic dream. Well, I must get along, he says. This further enrages McPint. You're no going out in that, he says. Why, the bar will be open in 45 minutes. Nevertheless, says McX. He zips his plastic wind cheater over the dromedary and abruptly leaves, mumbling, Cheero the new, not even stopping at the door for his usual blank reconnaissance of the atmospheres in and out. In the rain world, McX squashes up to Princess Street. At the corner, he closes his hand round a little one of air. Far away, a manny in an olive raincoat struggles up the mound. Like a decrepit omnibus, he labours under some doom enforced by the cannons brooding on the ramparts of the castle. Scotland yet. Thanking you. Oh. Time to employ the last of the bluebells. These are the very last of the bluebells. They're not going to work, are they? Time to celebrate 80s style.
Cheers to Todd.
Cheers to Todd, yes.
Cheers to Todd.
To Todd McEwen, everybody. I'll just let that sit for a minute. Just enjoy. Classic. Many a night. Open.